So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. And today is Thursday, and it's April the 14th, 2022. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you in the queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And at 3:30 today, we will be doing the Global Book Club. And so all that information is on the website. You can either go to events or you can click on schedule, either one, and you'll see Global Online Book Club. And I'll also put it in the notes for today, but you can go there and find the link to join us live by Zoom. And then you'll also, if you scroll down, I've put the recordings for March the 24th and March 31st. And the book club is actually, they're reading the Why Is This Happening to Me Again, but they say even if you've never read the book, join them in the club. It's actually like a live workshop. And Michael will be joining it today, and then after today, it will be the second and the fourth Thursday of each month until we get complete. Who knows how long that'll be. And so we'd love to have you join us there. There's people from all over the world. It's a fabulous group of people. We break off into small groups for just a couple of minutes, but the rest of the time we're all together. And connecting with other people is just fabulous, and they're really interested in this work and learning the Aramaic forgiveness. So join us on that, and I'm going to welcome Michael. Oh, and I did send out a newsletter today, so check your emails.
Check your email. Okay. I'll check my email. Welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. Delighted we get to move the conversation forward one more notch on the ladder. And if we have no hands up, Jean, do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it's all quiet, so go for it.
Okay. Well, we've been sort of sewing in over the last few weeks. I've actually been, one of the things I did when I got involved, you've heard us talk about the AVACEN, is that it kind of inspired me. It's a medical device, and it inspired me to go back to med school. This goes back last June. I actually went out and bought a course because microcirculation wasn't much of a topic back when I was in school. There wasn't much known about it. They talked about arteries and veins, but there wasn't much known about microcirculation. And when we experienced the power, the changes it made in Jeannie's dad. He had diabetic neuropathy, and he was at the point where we, in the mornings when we got up, we would play dominoes. We'd have breakfast and play dominoes with him, and he'd sit for maybe a max of 45 or 50 minutes, and because of the pain in his feet and his legs, he'd have to get up and walk around for a little while before we could continue. Within a matter of a couple of weeks of him using the AVACEN, we'd sit for 2.5 hours, and I'd say, "Dad, how are your feet and legs?" "Oh, nothing. I didn't even notice anything." I saw those kinds of things, the experiences I had with it. I became more engaged and more involved, and so we actually distributed this machine. And the company asked me a few weeks ago if I would do a training call on the AVACEN as it relates to sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance, which, I've mentioned from time to time, but never really sewed it together in a way that, fits and makes sense. And I've had some people asking questions, both about the AVACEN and this whole sympathetic, parasympathetic dominant system. And so I'm going to cover a little bit of material in that regard and just see where it leads, see what questions it takes us to and where we go. So there's the autonomic nervous system, autonomic simply meaning it works automatically. You don't have a choice over it. It just functions. You can go into some functions in it with some effort, but generally speaking, it operates totally and completely on its own. And so that system is a continuum. There aren't two different systems. There's not a sympathetic and a parasympathetic, but the two systems are one. They are linked. And it's kind of like a slider. If you've got a let's say a stereo system, it has a slider. If you put it over to the left, the sound is off. If you put it over to the right, then the sound is up loud. And so I kind of visualize it as that sort of a thing happening. And when you realize that, then being aware of what state you're in is pretty important. And if you're in that sympathetic dominant state, basically it's a state of alert. It's where you're in fight, flight, fright, or fear, or freeze. And when one is in that state, which is great, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, it sends blood to the larger muscles so you can run or fight. It changes the heart rate. It changes the breathing rate. Does all kinds of wonderful things to allow you to run really quickly or to fight off an attacker. And most people in medicine, we have acute diseases that medicine says, oh well, we can treat that disease. But the effects of sympathetic dominance are actually just starting to be realized. And when people live in sympathetic dominance on a continuous basis, if you're out there in the woods and you run into a bear, you want sympathetic dominance big time. You want that to function. You want that to happen, fully, because it means survival. But if you really don't want to live there, but you do anyway, your physiology is in trouble. So there's a picture, an out picturing of sympathetic dominance, and here it is. There's an old man who's probably not actually old in years. He's stooped over with back pain. His head is forward, his shoulders are rounded. He's 6 inches shorter than he was in his prime. He's in a state of increased readiness to escape as the unconscious thought process associated with sympathetic dominance leaves the muscles cramping at the slightest provocation. You hear people with their nighttime cramps and muscle cramps. This is sympathetic dominance. This old man has digestive difficulties. His breathing is shallow. Elimination is strained. In fact, it's legion, the joke about, how long it takes for a body function to happen. There's increased blood pressure. They're prone to stroke and heart failure. And it's kind of befuddled because in sympathetic dominance, higher brain functions or critical functions just aren't there. So this is the outpicturing of a life that lives in fear and protection. And when one lives there, while survival is, great, if you don't need survival, the rest of the system is shut down. So the ability to thrive is compromised. Rest and sleep are difficult. Immunity doesn't work very well. Digestion doesn't work very well. You hear the number of people who are taking a blue pill for acid reflux. The liver and the spleen don't function properly. elimination, reproduction. You hear the number of people who can't have children. That's part of sympathetic dominance. It shuts down these functions. Tissue repair doesn't happen. And as I say, those higher brain functions are compromised. So if you recognize that you've been in sympathetic dominance, you need to do something. Elsewise, you tend to outpicture that old man that I just described. So in doing this practitioner call, the AVACEN Corporation does a monthly practitioner call where doctors call in and there's training around the AVACEN. So they asked if I'd do that. And so in that presentation, we looked at the fact that the AVACEN is a physical form of forgiveness. And, we talk over and over again about how forgiveness is about removal. It isn't about letting somebody off the hook because of something that's moving inside of us. It's about the removing of what doesn't belong. And what the AVACEN does is it naturally, gently uses heat infused through a heat exchanger in the palm of the hand. And when that happens, within 10 minutes of putting one's hand in the AVACEN, all of the blood throughout the whole body, so it's a whole body treatment, all of the blood throughout the body has its temperature raised by about 0.8 of a degree. And what that does is it assists the body to increase blood flow throughout the whole structure, and in particular restores restricted microcirculation, which at the same time enhances waste removal. So, when you think about that balance, you don't want to be way over on the autonomic system all the time, and you don't want to be on the you don't want to be over on the parasympathetic or the sympathetic. You want to be in the middle. You want both systems in operation. And so you want to look at the functional relationship of microcirculation to the AVACEN. So what happens is that in sympathetic dominance, there are certain organs, the ones that are related to thriving, where the activity is restricted. And that restriction happens because of the all too common fight, flight, fright, and freeze conditions that are prevalent in our overstressed society. Now, long-standing pain, fear, and or hostility simulates in the body impending danger. And that results in the body being hurled into a chronic sympathetic dominant state. So somebody who lives in fear and hostility or pain tends to be in that state that's designed for meeting a bear. If you meet a bear, you want to go there. But if you don't meet a bear, if you don't have that kind of imminent danger, you don't want that active in you. But the mind can't tell and the body can't tell the difference between a real and an imagined experience. So in this wonderful state of alert, protection is paramount, and all functions that are not urgent to survival are reduced to minimal function or shut down altogether, at least restricted. And if this state of alert protection becomes the operating norm, organ systems that are designed to enhance our ability to thrive just don't get the power supply that they need, because blood flow has been starved to those systems. Capillaries are the only delivery system for fresh blood, oxygen, nutrients to our cells, and in the sympathetic dominant state, they're purposely restricted to conserve energy for the unconsciously projected need to escape or fight. So the AVACEN is designed, there are two things. It's a Class 2 medical device, and it's designed to cleared by the FDA for pain management and for relaxation. Two things that directly relate to this coming out of this sympathetic dominant state. So, and it's something that's a self-treatment. You can use it, anytime. And it's comfortable. It can be engaged in anywhere. You can be sitting at your computer. My hand's in the machine right this moment as we speak. You can do it on a minute's notice as often as you want, as often as necessary. pretty much every day when I am doing the radio show, since I'm sitting still for an hour, I have my hand in the AVACEN for an hour. I can do other things. Last thing in the evening, Jeanie usually does half an hour. I usually do a half an hour the last thing in the evening. And that's just kind of our norm for operating with this device. So when one's deprived of the ability to thrive by knowing living that life of dominance, that kind of, for me, so many people just become natural, and they don't even think about it. Every time they turn around, that fear is there. And it's thought of as being natural, and it's not natural. So just like a crystal clear river turns into a swamp where a tree blocks its flow, blood vessels and organs restricted by sympathetic dominance become crystallized and overgrown by foreign organisms, by accumulated wastes, and those wastes turn acidic. The blood vessels, as a result, become brittle, congested, and dysfunctional. You think of the person canceled the thought with a stroke. What happened? Blood vessel became brittle, and it literally just cracked and broke. So what the AVACEN does is it helps the body to recover from that long-term acidic swamp effect created by shutdown of the control mechanism at the headwaters of microcirculation. And this is a really key piece to understand. The body has somewhere between, depends whose numbers you take, somewhere between 10 and 60 billion capillaries. And again, an artery, an arteriole, a vein never delivered one drop of blood to a cell. Can't happen. They're not designed to do that. Those vessels are designed to bring blood to the capillary and take blood away from the capillary to return to the heart for reoxygenation, to go to the kidneys to be cleaned. So the only mechanism are these capillaries, and at least theoretically, they should be continuously delivering that fresh, oxygenated, nutritionally charged blood to our trillions of cells. But the gatekeepers of this system of capillaries are called precapillary sphincters, sometimes called a precapillary orifice. And they're muscle fibers at each of your 60 trillion capillaries. And a capillary is a blood vessel that's about the 10th the thickness of a hair, and there's a set of muscle fibers at the head of that. Mechanism is designed for protection. When a real, or as I said before, even an imagined threat is presented, the system automatically closes off microcirculation to non-essential functions that are, and it's basically conserving energy that's needed to escape or fight. So you'll hear, and we've talked about, and this has kind of been part of my study, we've presented, several times the last few months, ways to stimulate or activate the parasympathetic nervous system. But if you stimulate and try to activate that without opening the necessary blood supply, the body's going to be frustrated its ability to move into a full and effective thrive mode. And that's what the AVACEN is designed to remedy. It remedies it by enhancing muscle relaxation and reducing the related pain. And again, they're the two functions that the device is cleared for by the FDA. So uptight is a literal description. And what the AVACEN does is it, so to speak, energetically funds microcirculation by the application of this heated blood to the tightened, closed-off muscle fibers at the capillary head. So you've literally got, again, depending whose number, somewhere between 10 and 60 billion of these capillary orifices. And they're muscle fibers. And what happens when you warm a muscle? The muscle relaxes, it softens. So when blood leaves your hand, it takes about 3 minutes from the time it leaves your hand to go through the body and come back to your hand again. And so 10 minutes with your hand in the AVACEN, and all of the blood in the body is warmed by approximately 1 degree, a little less than 1 degree. And so when you pour heat in, there's a heat exchanger in the palm of your hand. You'll notice that if you're cold, you spontaneously rub your hands together or blow in your hands. Why do you do that? Because there's a heat exchanger. There's a radiator in the palm of your hand. You may not have realized that, but that's why you blow on your hands. That's why you rub your hands together. That rubbing of the hands together creates friction, creates heat. And the heat is absorbed by that radiator and literally is distributed throughout the whole body. You'll notice if you get overheated, embarrassed or what have you, and there's excess heat being produced, what happens? Your hands, your palms start to sweat. That's that radiator that's removing heat from the structure. Now, there's several ways you can get the blood temperature to rise. You can go sit in a hot bath for an hour. You do that, nice hot bath, your blood temperature is going to go up, and you're going to get a similar effect. The effect is not as pointed, however, as with the AVACEN, because when you get into a hot tub or a hot bath or you do a sauna or you go run for 2 hours, you sweat. And the heat that's generated by those activities literally goes to the moisture under the skin, and that moisture under the skin evaporates, goes to the surface of the skin, evaporates, and the evaporation cools the body. Well, one of the genius pieces of Tom Muehlbauer when he designed this was to have the temperature set so that it stays under the sweat response, so that you don't dissipate any heat by sweat response. All of the heat is dissipated when the body says, I've got too much heat in here and I have to throw it off. The heat is dissipated by the capillaries opening to the organs and the extremities to dissipate that heat rather than through sweat. And so it's a brilliant device for doing exactly that. And when you put your hand in it, and as I say, you can do anything from it takes about 10 minutes to get the whole body, the blood content of the body heated by just a little less than 1 degree, and that's all it takes to change everything going on within the system. So when you've got a crystal clear river that turns into a swamp when a tree blocks its flow, that's basically what happens with the blood vessels when these capillary heads contract, the muscle fibers contract to shut down blood flow to the capillaries. So the stimulation, the infusion of heat warms the blood, pours over the blood vessels soften, relax, and that control mechanism at we could say the headwaters of the capillaries lets loose, opens, and now you've got blood flow moving in, and that blood flow starts to clean out what it hasn't been able to clean out because of the shutdown. I used the example of the log, falls over the crystal clear stream, and it's not long with it being blocked up before the stream isn't very crystal clear anymore. There's leaves and gunk and moss grows, and different organisms start to live there, things that don't belong there, and all of a sudden you've got a stinky swamp. Well, that's kind of what happens at these in the capillary bed when you're not getting the flow that you need through the capillaries. That's why all of those symptoms of the old man that I talked about happen, because the tissue repair and building, the delivery of fresh oxygen nutrition, the removal of waste isn't happening. The AVACEN basically remedies this problem by enhancing muscle relaxation, reducing the related pain. So these precapillary sphincters or orifices are opened, and you have a restoration of microcirculation. So over time, by restoring that flow of oxygen-rich nutrition and nutrition-rich blood to that deprived tissue, the resupplying of blood vessels, organs, and systems urgent to the capacity to thrive are repaired, and you end up with new levels of vitality, new levels of aliveness, new levels of energy, and all of those functions that were compromised by sympathetic dominance now are able to step up, operate, and there's an enhancement in elimination, the ability to reproduce, just the whole range of things, liver function, spleen function, all of those things are improved because the flow has been opened to those organs. And it's one of the places we want to go. That balance is so important. I remember back about 30 years ago, I had a woman who was a student in New York City. She was very Italian. And in the class, we were talking about balance. And she shared a story about her father and her father's passing. And, you know, Dad was sick, and they knew he was going to go. He was on the verge of leaving. And she said she was sitting with him, and she asked him, Papa, what is the most important thing in life? And, you know, and she said this rather lightheartedly, considering what happened. But her father, she said, he sat bolt upright and pointed up to the ceiling, and in Italian said, Valencia, Valencia, and laid back down and died right there on the spot. His last words to her were Valencia, balance. So looking to have balance is key, and of course, it ties right in with the forgiveness process. When you're talking about physical forgiveness, we're talking about the removal of toxic waste, crystallized acidic wastes. You know, the byproducts of metabolism generally tend to be acidic. Carbon dioxide is acidic. You'll notice when we breathe out, if you're not breathing properly, there's a buildup of carbon dioxide in your system, and that's an acidic gas. When the body becomes acidic, it's very difficult for any function to happen properly because the interstitial fluid, the fluids moving through your cellular structure, are designed to be alkaline. And the core of the cell is acidic. It's designed to be acidic. And one of the things, for instance, that takes nutrition into the cell is a thing called osmotic pressure, and there's got to be a differential from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. So the inside of the cell is acidic, the fluid around the cell is alkaline, and that creates a pressure that draws nutrition and oxygen such into the cell. When, because of the shutdown of flow and increase in acid wastes, the interstitial fluid becomes acidic, all of a sudden that differential isn't there, and now the cell can't get what it needs. So there's just so many things that are related to it. And one of the things that you've heard me say many times over the years, and this is the first device that I've found that you could say this about, is that anything that's truly healing, if it's got a little insert in it, the insert's going to talk about all the wonderful side effects that it has. And this is the only medical treatment that I know of that everybody that I've ever talked to, when they use it, say, I love the side effects of this medical treatment. It's like, where else do you hear that? And it's because it's simply there supporting the structure in what it needs, where, you know, every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. You'll notice in the package of every drug, there's an insert, and the insert tells you about all the body parts that are going to break down, all the things that can go wrong, and all the deficiencies and diseases that are going to be caused. They've got us convinced that those are side effects, but they're not side effects at all. They're diseases. Truly healing substance would not produce disease symptoms. Now, that doesn't mean the body won't go into healing crisis and have symptoms of disease, but it'll be a healing process, a healing crisis, as we talked about, rather than a disease process. So in a nutshell, that's sympathetic, parasympathetic, and Jeanie had asked if I would talk about that because there were some people wanting clarification. Jeanie, does that cover the topic as you were thinking about having it covered? Any other thoughts or questions that come to mind for you?
It does cover it. And the only other thing that I thought of, and you mentioned it, but just to give a personal note, I went through when I was 16 to 19 years old. I had gotten married and was in an abusive relationship, and he abused me every day for 3 years. And I got to the point where I stayed in that freeze mode because I actually got to where, and in the freeze, you disassociate. It's like you leave your body so that you don't feel the full impact of what's going on for you. And if you stay in that too long, which I did, then you get to a burnout stage, and it can be challenging then to get the system booted back up and to where it's operating properly and everything. But I personally love the AVACEN. Like I could be, just like yesterday, we didn't have Aria because her mom tested positive for COVID, so she's in quarantine with her. But so it gave me the opportunity to work on my taxes. Such fun. And after just a little while working on the taxes and kind of getting in this stress
sympathetic
state,
dominant mode.
Yeah, I did. I just stopped and I went and I took 30 minutes on the AVACEN. And then I think when I took my hand out, I actually looked at you and said, okay, back to Tax City. But it helped to just, do a reset. And, we used it a lot when we had COVID back in December. And it's just phenomenal how it goes through your body, through your system, and just, I can't think of a better word, it just resets everything.
Well, and, two things. Oftentimes, they'll say in a situation where there's a great deal of fear for someone, well, why didn't you just do something? What are you, a coward or what have you? And an aspect, that fourth aspect of the parasympathetic dominance, literally, you see it throughout the whole creation. It isn't something that's under choice. This is the autonomic nervous system. It's automatic. No conscious thought or action is required for it to go into play. The most common example, we say somebody's playing possum. What happens when fear strikes the possum? They go into freeze mode. They don't say, oh, a predator's going to get me. Let's see. I think I'll play dead. Their structure freezes. They can't move. And so it is with someone who is in that fear state. There's a certain point where the autonomic nervous system takes over and it's freeze. It was an interesting example of that. We shared a while back that we've been watching the series on Netflix called Outlander. Powerful. And there's a situation where a young girl gets raped, and she finally tells her father about it. And she's, I should have fought back. I should have fought harder. I could have beat him off. And her father's saying, well, but wait a minute, if you had, you might have gotten murdered. You did the best. And she's all down on herself. And finally, in order to make his point, he says, okay, yeah, you're right. You should have been able to fight him off. You failed at it. You really sucked at that, that kind of approach he's taking with her. And he works around to where he gets behind her, and he gets a hold of her in a way that she can't break loose. Break loose. Get loose to fight me off. And it was just a beautiful, powerful example of how he taught his daughter, no, sweetheart, you did the best you could do. You went into freeze mode, and it very likely saved your life. And oftentimes the person is called a coward or what have you. It happens with police. It happens with first responders. When that nervous system hits the right way, everything shuts down. It's not a choice. And so, awareness is half the battle of winning. And if you want to win in your life, be aware, if there are places where you said, I should have done better, could have done better, recognize that you probably were doing the best that you could do, and that was it. That was it. And forgiveness, removing the judgments about self, is a really powerful and profound thing to do in that type of situation.
And you had mentioned that, whether it's a threat or a perceived threat, when someone's been in that state for so long, here again, a personal example, the year that I finally got a divorce and got out of that situation, even though he was not chasing me or stalking me or trying to get me back or anything, I moved 10 times in 1 year just out of the fear that I held of a perceived, and it wasn't real, but to me it was very real.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's another piece of it. There's another really important thing that I've observed about the AVACEN. When I came to the conclusion, it was after several months of using this, this is physical forgiveness, is that the response that you're talking about there, sweetie, and when we first met, you started to work on a whole new level on that 3 years of your life and the years before that inspired you at 16 to leave home and get married in order to escape. And still, when there was a trigger that would come, you'd go into a level of upset. In the early days of being together, your upset would go on for, I don't remember exactly, but extended periods of time. As you did your work, as you did your forgiveness work and such over the years, you reduced that significantly, and when that state was triggered, you would be there, but for shorter and shorter periods of time. And what I've observed is since you started to use the AVACEN, probably you've advanced in the last year and a half, probably 70% further using the AVACEN on the emotional issues and the emotional responses. The time it takes you to come back to conscious awareness is minuscule compared to what it was before you started to use the AVACEN, even though you were doing your work. So it really is a physiological thing. Those when you think about that uptight state, when you think about the body going into its fear mode, what is it? It's mind energy. Where's the mind energy go? It goes, remember we talked about the neuropeptide and the receptor site on the cell. Where does it go? It goes to the muscle fibers. That, if you think about one of the examples I used in the training that I did with the medical professionals was talking about, just think about yourself. You're in a quiet, relaxed, sweet place, and everything's wonderful. You're breathing and having fun. And all of a sudden, there's a noise that your mind interprets as threat. What happens? And I just invite everybody to do that right now. You're in this peaceful place, and all of a sudden, there's a noise that your mind interprets as threat. Just notice when you imagine it, what happens to your body. Notice your breathing changes. Your abdomen tightens. Your breath is much more shallow. And notice that even your body wants to rise up, just start as the muscles tighten. And this is, we're talking about, again, somewhere between 1 billion or 10 billion and 60 billion capillaries. Muscle fibers tighten at once. And you think about the whole body that goes into this tightened space. That means restricted blood flow to the whole thrive system of the body. People live there. I mean, it's tragic to health. It's all the diseases of our modern civilization that medicine really has no treatment for. You can't drug somebody out of it. People have to take charge of their own lives and start to do their work. And of course, we're here to support that work. And that was the thing that attracted me to the AVACEN, was the way that it, Patrick McGann, you've all heard Patrick on the show at other times. He's a fellow naturopath that I've known for half a century. And he, at 74, had diabetic neuropathy in his feet. He could he'd get up in the morning, prior to having the AVACEN, and he'd work for 2 hours, and he would have excruciating pain in his feet, and he'd have to go and put his feet up by the end of the day. Well, within 5 or 6 weeks of using the AVACEN, he shared, and this is what inclined me to say, I want to try this thing out. Within 5 or 6 weeks, he was at the point where he could work 5 hours a day. And he said, at the end of that 5 hours, I have an aching in my feet, but my feet aren't in excruciating pain like they used to be after 2 hours. And then y'all might remember I went to Florida about a year ago now, or it was actually a little less than a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, to do some work with a physician down there in Sarasota. And on the way back, I stopped to see Patrick, and Patrick has I had moved into a house where he had a Quonset hut, and he's a massage therapist. He was building himself a new massage therapy office in his Quonset hut. And I finished my day in Sarasota, was driving up there, and it was about 10 o'clock at night when I got there. And here's Patrick. This is the guy who less than a year earlier could stand or work for 2 hours, and he'd have to go back and put his feet up for the rest of the day in excruciating pain. This is 10 o'clock at night. He's been working on his building for 12 hours, and he's still up on a ladder and hammering and, putting together his new office. That's the difference it made for him with diabetic neuropathy. They actually did a research project out of University of San Diego in California, double-blind controlled study on diabetics, and they found that it reduced blood sugar after a meal, within an hour after a meal, by 60 points, and that's about the equivalent of a brisk 1 hour walk by laying back, relaxing, putting your hand in this little machine, and actually resting. Most people rest more deeply than ever. I know I had one friend who had another device, a PEMF device that they loved, and I was talking to her about it. We just happened to have a conversation, and she expressed an interest when I mentioned it, and she's like, well, but I sleep really well, so I don't really need anything like that. I've got my other machine. And upshot of the conversation, she wanted to try it out, so I loaned her one. And the first night that she got it, she used it before sleep. She called me in the morning and said, I'm selling my PEMF device and buying one of these. I thought I was sleeping well. And she ended up getting an AVACEN from us. So it's pretty powerful. But there's the story on the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and how this device opens and moves people back to and literally clears out the energetic patterns from the muscle fibers at the head of each of these capillaries. So it's an interesting project to look at. And we've got about 20 minutes left, a little less than 20 minutes. So if you're out there in listener land and you have a thought or a question, if you push 1, I'd love to talk to you. What's on your mind?
And we do have a hand up. And before anybody says, oh, just give me a machine and then I can quit doing worksheets. No. You might want to mention that. You still have to change your mind. There's still work to be done, yes. I have found, you've heard me say it, without necessarily referring to the AVACEN, that in the last year to 2 years, I've done more and deeper levels of work than I've done in my whole 50 years of developing this work. And I feel like the AVACEN has been a really important part of that for me personally. So let's go ahead and say hello to our caller. Awesome. I believe it's Miss Celinda, area code 541. You're on the air.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Welcome, young lady.
Welcome. I really appreciated your conversation this morning about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, because I'm going bingo right and left. However, I would also like you to reference the lymphatic system in addition to the capillary system, just from
right.
the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system.
So oxygen is breathed into the lungs. They're little air sacs that absorb that oxygen, and they're connected to capillaries. and the oxygen is transferred to the blood through those capillaries into the heart, pumped out through the arteries. Arteries go down to smaller blood vessels called arterioles, then go down into the capillary bed, and then once the blood goes through the capillary, then the lymphatics are where when you've got a proper blood flow, the lymphatics are kind of like the filter system. We hear about somebody, as a kid, they take their lymph glands out. They take out the tonsils. Well, that's like, you don't change your oil often enough in your car, and the mechanic says, well, your oil filter's all stuffed up, so we're just going to bypass it. We're going to take the oil filter out. Well, how long would your car last? Not very long. You need the filter there. And so the lymphatic system is the vacuum cleaner, and lymph tissue, which are things like it's throughout the whole body, in the armpits. The lymphatic vessels are what bring the waste up out of. Once it's gone through the capillary, then the waste products of metabolism, the acidic carbon dioxide by the lymph system, brought back and dumped into the body for elimination, into the eliminative channels to be removed. So that's where the lymph comes in. And you can't get lymph flow if you don't have that precapillary orifice opened and blood flowing into the capillary, because that's the source of the lymph. It's the clean fluid.
So I had my tonsils out when I was 3 years old. I had my appendix out when I was 14. And then the doctor very sheepishly said after the appendix was out, oh, well, we think it was an acute ovulatory attack. And so I lost my appendix and I lost my tonsils. So can you explain how the tonsils are the filter for the cleansing
just like the filter in your car.
Okay, so that's
exactly.
The tonsils.
And they become inflamed and infected when we're overloaded with organisms that don't belong in the structure. The appendix are a little different. The appendix are a little different function. The medical profession talks about the appendix as a vestige organ, meaning, well, you don't really need it. It's just there. It's kind of left over from some time. We don't know why, but, it's just left over. It's not left over at all. Have you ever made sourdough bread?
Yes.
When you make sourdough bread, what do? Just before you bake the bread, what have you done?
Well, you
take a
let
piece
it ride.
Right, but you take a piece of the bread and you save it. What do you save it for?
So you can
it gives bacteria to the next time you make your sourdough bread. That's exactly what the appendix is. The appendix is there designed to keep the bacteria that seeds the next round of waste to come through the colon in completing its job. When you take it out, you just got rid of the sourdough starter. That's what the appendix are for.
Okay, cool. So now I'm making popcorn connections between my tonsils being out and my appendix being out and my health issues right now at 77.
Yeah, it would tie in directly.
Right. So since I don't have an appendix and I don't have tonsils,
take extra care.
In relation to
what you think, what you talk, what you speak, how you act, and what you eat. Someone who doesn't have, the protect mechanisms have been removed needs to be more careful, or they can more easily get into difficulty.
Right. So I've been on the right track for that. And I'm very thankful for the Aramaic gospel because it's really causing quantum leaps in my thinking process, in my emotional states. The other question I have to ask you, since is that this is a silly question perhaps, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Since I don't have appendix, would fermented foods be good for me? And since I have endemic candidiasis that I have, I think I have it. I'm beginning to find all the thought issues behind it. Would sourdough bread, for example, be good as an adjunct to my eating program, or should I avoid it?
My take would be that your sauerkrauts and fermented foods are going to be awesome, because that's exactly what the starter is in the colon. But in terms of sourdough bread, bread, the thing that feeds candida is sugar.
That's
and unless it's a really hearty whole grain bread, it's basically sugar once it gets into the body.
Right. Yeah, I only eat 100% whole spelt grain sourdough. That's it. And I don't eat it often. However,
probably a good idea not to eat often.
And since I have bacterial overgrowth as well as yeast overgrowth, I suspect, I don't know this, it's all an exploration. I've given up on traditional medicine because they never gave me answers to the questions I was asking. And so I found that just going in and asking to be shown is my best way, and I still reach out for outer information as an adjunct to help. So I'm not sure that the yeasted products or mushrooms or the fermented foods work for me, because I seem to flare up with candida symptoms.
Have you had antibiotics a lot in your life? That's pretty normal with people who had antibiotics.
I was younger. And vaccines, a lot of vaccines, because I was a military dependent, which I stopped having vaccines about 40 years ago. I said, this is killing me. I'm not doing this anymore. I hear you. That was my personal intuitive hit.
So you want to stay away from every kind of sugar that you can imagine.
I don't even eat
a little bit of stevia,
dates, or stevia.
A little bit.
A funny bitter taste in my mouth, and so I don't use it either. When I make my cranberry sauce, Michael and Jeanie, it's pure cranberry sauce, raw cranberry sauce, zero zilch else. And it's not exactly a hit at Thanksgiving parties, let me tell you. But it works for me. But
fruit juice. You want to stay away from fruit juice?
I was just going to say, throw in. What about putting blueberries in the cranberries?
Blueberries have too much sugar for me. If I eat blueberry, I can eat blackberries. Raspberries are too sweet for me. I don't do any dates. I don't do any dried fruits, nothing. And that's pretty much what's kept me
or you get a candida flare up.
Functioning. Oh, yeah. That's the beginning of it. And,
so you stay away from juices too then?
Oh, yeah. And there are certain fruits I don't eat either because they're just a sugar hit. Apples work really well for me. Cranberries, blackberries, the tartar fruits sort of thing. But anyway, I just thought I wanted to make the connection with the lymphatic system. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And also, my stinking thinking is primary. It can get me in trouble all the time. And not moving. I tend to be a couch potato. And so for me, it takes a great deal of psychological effort to, and I also tend to deny myself, as you and Jeanie probably remember from my honors. My honor for self was way down. And so, and I had one more thing, if you have enough time. I have one more quick aha to share with you.
Before you go to the aha, the other thing is that I'd suggest you utilize your volition in order to move, because where there is restricted circulation, movement enhances circulation.
Right. And then with my lockdown
lymphatic
breath
and everything else.
with me. Right. And then the breath. right,
Yep.
because you shared my lockdown breaths for me. Okay. The quick aha was all of my life I have had a crucial dysfunction in depth awareness. It wasn't depth perception. It was depth awareness. I never could, and I can't even today at this moment, I haven't been able to until this aha to even entertain the possibility that I could have depth awareness. And I realized that all my life I've felt invaded, that there was no space for me to be. And I went, aha, no space for me to be. So what am I going to do? I am going to not make space for me. And I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm doing worksheets on it.
Good catch.
Yeah, I went, oh, it's not the awareness's fault or the lack of it. I created that for myself. So anyway, I'm playing with that one. I'll let you know if anything changes.
Hey, nice work. That's awesome.
I
But
thought
move,
so. I was pretty proud
activity
of
for
myself.
that circulation.
That's it. And there ain't anyone on this planet that is going to make that space for me but me.
Yep, you got it.
Thank you, Jeanie and Michael.
And
Love you both.
we're here to support.
Oh,
and we're here to support it.
And did you ever get Aria's little Easter gift?
We did. Yes,
we did.
That butterfly was awesome.
You had that wrapped up so protectively.
The little.
But we have not. The little rabbits. But we have not had her since we got it, though. She's in quarantine with her mom right now.
Yeah, that's what I
her mom.
understood. And it's so slow with the mail at Easter and Christmas. So, yeah. But I bought that plate. I absolutely adored it. But it had the little grooves in it. And so I was afraid to use it because its food or stuff would get stuck in there. And then I thought, Aria, this is for Aria.
That's the cutest plate.
It is very cute.
I almost needed a hammer and chisel to get the package open, though. It was so taped on top of tape on top of tape on top of tape.
That's my mommy's fault, ha ha. She taught me how to wrap packages before tape was ever available. It was like one of those nets that the military recruits have to climb up. Is what a package would look like when she finished.
Cool.
My packages get there. So, and besides, it was all recycled, Jeanie.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
It is cute. It's sitting right on her table, waiting for her to get here to see it. But as we say, we got cut out yesterday.
She called us on FaceTime, and she was like, "I want to come to Nene and Pepple's," and tears were running down her face, and it was like, "Oh, sweetie." But anyway, it'll be here when she gets here.
Sweet.
And thank you.
Well,
thank you for thinking of her so often.
Right, and I'll send you a picture because we're under about 4 inches of snow right now.
Oh no, we just uncovered our garden.
Yeah, we're looking like we've probably had our last freeze. So I just sowed a cover crop yesterday and waiting for it's supposed to rain. If it doesn't rain, I'm going to have to go out and water it again. We just got some buckwheat crop in and covered it with grass and chopped leaves. So we're rocking, and our first two potato plants are up already.
Well, I could be envious, but I think but I'm going to bless your garden instead. How about that?
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, we actually planted our potatoes the 1st of February.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Well, I know it's getting to the end of your show, but I just wanted to share those questions and thoughts with you and tell you how much I'm trying to listen when I can, but my time is getting more constricted now because of the warming weather. So I keep thinking of you all, and I keep you in my thoughts and prayers.
All right, lots of love.
My multiple
Take care.
hearts.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
And in closing, just remind everybody that in an hour and a half we have the book club.
Yes, come and play. The link's on the website, whyagain.org. Go to activity or events and come join us for the book study. Blessings.